Hello, welcome to my channel Conscious Growing. I'm Matthias. And today I want to talk about a very important aspect of the work of Dr. Claire Weeks. For those of you who have never heard of her, she was an Australian psychologist, and she was practicing when I remember right, in the 50s and 60s. And so she was a psychologist and doctor, and she suffered from chronic symptoms, anxiety, sensitized nervous system. And she went through this process on her own, and she developed some principles. And these principles are still used in modern times, where we can find so many people out there offering ways to cope with anxiety and all kinds of techniques to deal with anxiety. But for her it was very important not only to make people feel better, furthermore it was her aim to guide people through this process of full recovery. And there are some very simple principles she's offering, and so the first principle was to face the anxiety, then to allow the anxiety to be there and not fight it. And the third principle was, or still is, of course, not adding second fear. And the fourth principle is let time pass. And I've talked about the principles in some other videos, but today I want to talk about a specific and maybe the most important aspect of this method. And this is about using your right inner voice. So what does it mean? It means that when we end up in the anxiety cycle, chronic symptom cycle, we are so full of fear because of the symptoms we experience. And to have some results and some changes, it's needed to practice on and on and on and use these principles to get rid of anxiety. And what she's referring to, according to the voice in us about this anxiety, is to build up a right inner voice. That's how she called it. So what is this right inner voice? I want to start to tell you what's not the right inner voice. Because usually when we are scared, frightened, sensitized, all the things we experience are very intense. And I've spoken about this a lot in these videos, but there's a voice in us, and this voice is usually the voice of panic. So there is this hope and fingers crossed, like, oh, hopefully I can come through this, and hopefully I make it. Hopefully my symptoms are better tomorrow, or hopefully my symptoms go away because tomorrow I have to go to an appointment and it feels so awful right now, and I just hope and pray that it's getting better tomorrow. And so this voice is the voice of, as I said, panic, the voice of fear, and we are usually kind of hijacked by this voice of fear without realizing it, because we are scared for a good reason, because this symptoms are real, the state is very unpleasant, uncomfortable, and if we don't have any knowledge about it, of course we are scared. But even if we collect knowledge and understand why we are in this state, this usually helps people to come down a little bit because they are less bewildered and they understand why they're in this state. This is helpful and this is a huge step. But then you want to develop a new voice in you. And this new voice is the right inner voice. So the question is, how do we develop this right inner voice? Because right now we are ruled by the, let's call it the voice of doubt. We don't trust in ourselves. Everything seems to be a threat. And our world shrinks and we don't allow ourselves to do certain things and so on. And the right inner voice builds up by having new experiences. So first of all, you practice. You face and allow your symptoms, your states, your emotions. You try to add, not add second fear, and you give yourself time for this process. These are the basics, and you do this all over and over again. But of course, this practice wouldn't be enough. So imagine you just sit in your home and you're practicing and practicing and practicing, but on the other hand, you're not able to leave the house, or you start to avoid things because of that. In this case, you confirming to your brain that there's a threat. So the brain says it's a threat to go outside, so you don't go outside anymore. But inside, maybe you kind of desperately try to allow and face and hope the symptoms to be gone. But this doesn't work. So you continue to be frightened when the symptoms are really intense. You're not really allowing them. And so what we need is some action as well. So it's a proactive process. And of course, you don't need to run a marathon when you haven't been out for a while, or you have been in your comfort zone, for example, just running around the block. So you really need to make some proactive steps towards recovery. And so therefore, you start to collect new experiences. And this will feel awful in the beginning because you avoided things. And let's say you haven't been to the supermarket for quite a while, and then you go for the first time. Collect all your braveness and you go there, and you might feel panic, or you might feel an intensity of your symptoms and so on, and you feel very unwell. But maybe there's this voice in you, I'm going to do it anyway, I'm just going to go there. And then you come back home, and in the evening you reflect on your day, and you will say, oh my gosh, I went to the supermarket after 7 months. I did it again. So then you have a good reason to write down and say, I had panic, I felt awful, I had symptoms, but I went there. I did it. So this is a little win. And then 2 days later, you think, okay, I have to do it again. And you do it again. And maybe you have a strong panic attack then. And nevertheless, you stay in the situation, you go through it, and you come back home, you say to yourself back in the evening, oh, this was more intense, even more intense than the first time, but I did it. Wow, I went through it. I also tried not to push myself through the situation. I also tried to not hurry through this situation. I stayed with this unpleasant panic or whatever it's, or just anxiety, and I went through it. So another success. And then you write it down. And you can even make it more precise, means you can start to have a list. That's what I did. This is what I learned in a program. And I used a left column to write down how I felt that day, the intensity of my anxiety, the symptoms I had, the way I felt, also the way I also wrote down my thinking patterns, and then in the right column I wrote down my successes. Because then with time you add more successes. And here I would say don't underestimate even these little wins. Like, you know, you might feel like I can't get up today. I'm so exhausted. I have so many symptoms. I'm so desperate. And nevertheless you get up and you go into the bathroom, you take the shower, you brush your teeth, you do all this kind of stuff. And you make a breakfast, you have a little walk, you might go to the supermarket. And if you are someone who started at rock bottom, at zero, housebound, bedbound maybe, and if you start to write down these little successes, you feed your subconscious in a new way. So in other words, you slowly shift your attention away from this pattern of being stuck on all the worries, all the things that don't work, this rumination, this like, oh my God, I'm in this for a year now already and I don't get better, my anxiety is getting worse, and so on. So you slowly shift your attention to your successes. And so what will happen is that this voice of doubt will appear all the time. It will always try to tackle you. It will try to pull you back into the anxiety state. And the more wins you have, the more louder it will get. So it really needs your courage to keep going in slow but constant steps. And here's one hint about all of this, because what people, and I did this mistake many, many times, I can tell you, is like you start adding a new activity. Let's say this supermarket example. So you go to the supermarket once and you go twice and it works more or less good. You have some anxiety, maybe some panic, but you go through it. But then sometimes you might really feel awful, so awful, and then you don't go again because you think, no, the anxiety is too bad today, I don't go. So then you start to avoid again. And then it's really hard to get back on track, because then you kind of tried your best for a short amount of time, but then you are kind of consumed by the anxiety again. And here's the important point. The brain needs some consistency to make a new experience. So to stay in this example, so you should go to the supermarket for, I don't want to use a number, but you should do it constantly for, let's say, 2 months. So you go every week, 3 or 4 times, no matter how you feel. And you do it, and you do it again, and you have all kinds of experience. Sometimes it feels rough to go there, and other times you almost feel normal, and then after these normal experiences you might have another intense panic while you're in there. This all can happen, but the brain functions like this. The brain sees, look, Matthias is going to the supermarket consistently, and he's doing it no matter how he feels. So it mustn't be dangerous. So the anxiety, the brain sees that you are able to do it, and you do it anyway. And then after a couple of weeks, it doesn't see it as a threat anymore. And then you build up some trust, and you build up your right inner voice, because you have it in your book, and you see, I've done this for the last couple of weeks, and I was able to do things no matter how I felt. And this builds up the trust. And then this right inner voice gets stronger, because you realize, no matter how bad I feel, I'm able to do this. I'm able to go through this. I can do more than I thought in the morning. And by this right inner voice gets stronger and more present. And the anxiety gets weaker, of course. This voice of doubt gets weaker, because it still will try to keep you safe and will say, no, no, stay at home. And then you add a new activity maybe, and you do something out of your comfort zone. And again, it will try to protect you, will try to help you. And you use it. You say, okay, thank you, anxiety. Thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm okay. I will go to the next event. And then you start to build up your confidence by consistency again. So when you add a new thing, you do it for a couple of weeks. And you do it, you do it, you do it, until the brain realizes, he can go to the cinema, for example. He went to the cinema, he went to the restaurant. He did this regularly, and you see that, and the brain sees there, wow, he's just doing it. I produce symptoms. I'm screaming, I'm trying to hold him back, but he's kind of not pushing me aside, but he's moving forward and slowly adding the things he wants to do. And so the scared brain starts to feel more safe again. And the right inner voice is building. And in the beginning, it might be weak when you start doing this. And it's a subconscious process, of course. I mean, it's a conscious process, but you give new informations to your subconscious. And this is changing something. And then you do it again, and you do it again. And the stronger the right inner voice gets, the more you see that you can trust on it. It gets louder, and it's like when you want to go to old patterns of, oh no, what if, not again. It can support you, and you can realize, oh, again, no, I've been here. I felt these sensations before. It's nothing new. I'm able to go through very unpleasant sensations and states. I can do this. I've done it before and I can do it again. And also I'm able to act. And I remember when have these I had this very intense anxiety, sometimes even overnight. My subconscious was producing all these fearful thoughts the whole night through, when I couldn't sleep, and it was producing it, and it's very hard to allow it from moment to moment, especially at night. But even there, you have to practice in the same way. You allow the unpleasant state, you allow the insomnia, you don't fight against it, and you go through it as best as you can. And it doesn't need to feel good. It's just like the question, do you go down the rabbit hole? Do you follow this voice of doubt, this voice of fear, the voice of panic? Or are you able to guide yourself through these difficult moments, intense moments, and you build up this voice? You can say, okay, I had a very rough time 2 days ago, and I went through it, and I will do it again. And by this, you build up confidence. So what she was saying, if you don't develop this inner voice, you always will fall back to square one, because you think you're at square one, because the symptoms are like at square one, because this is not a linear journey, as we all know. It feels like a roller coaster. It's this so often mentioned, one step forward, 2 steps back, and it is like this. And it needs your consistency, and it needs your shift of the way you look at things, and most important, to build up this right inner voice. Because if you don't, you will fall back easily into the fear cycle. You will think, the symptoms, will never be able to do it. Even you practice your allowance, this is a huge step, but for many, allowance means I allow, but I want to get rid of my symptoms. And that doesn't work, of course. You develop this willingness in you to allow everything. And when you can do this, you also will strengthen your right inner voice, because you are learning to sit in the storm. You are able to face the storm as good as you can. And you also keep going with your life. And this combination will bring you to recovery. It's tough, but it's the only way. Otherwise, you're always consumed, you're always pulling back, you're still avoiding, and this won't lead anywhere. So, very important aspect of recovery. And you can use this video as a reflection for yourself. You can ask yourself the question, do I have this right inner voice in some kind of way? Am I aware that this is very important? Because otherwise you are like you're going up the creek with a boat, and you don't have a paddle, and you're absolutely lost. But you can build this strength and inner confidence by your own personal experiences, by your own shifts of mindset. So yeah, I'm gonna end up here. So if you find any value in this, please leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done yet, and a thumbs up is always welcome. So that's it for today, and I wish you the best. We talk soon. Bye.